All right. Yeah. So the first guy that we got is the big name, Freddie Freeman, that's still left in free agency. He's rejected two deals now from the Atlanta Braves. He turned down a deal during the regular season, and he turned down a deal during the offseason as well, which was of 6 years, around 180 million on both of them. I think the first one was around 5 years for 130. And my prediction is that he gets that 5 years, 130, and goes to the LA Dodgers. And I know I'm going to sound biased here, but it's just he's from California. And I just think coming home, ending his career in LA might be the ideal situation. If you're turning down so many deals from the Atlanta Braves, my hope is kind of shattered that he returns to Atlanta. And it kind of just makes sense for the Dodgers to go attack him. They just lost Max Muncy to the torn UCL. And I'm going to sound like another biased Dodgers fan, but now that I like continue to look at that play from that Milwaukee Brewers player, I'm starting to think that that was intentional. When you look at the way that he was running down the line, when you're running down, you got to cut to the right, and he was running straight through the line, and you could see Max Muncy's arm the entire time. It looked like he wanted. I don't know if he looked like he wanted to do it, but I've you definitely getting some question marks on that. Mateo, I'll start with you. Where do you see one of the top free agents heading to?
Yeah, my answer might be a little bit boring, but I really don't see Freddie Freeman in any other jersey except for a Braves jersey. I think obviously there's some disputes because the Braves and him aren't, at some common ground here. But I think we've seen in the past the last deal that he turned down was six for 180. We've seen in the past how important that seventh year is for a lot of big name free agents. They really want that seventh year, and they're willing to relocate pretty much anywhere where they can get that length of a contract. And I think quite frankly, Atlanta kind of needs to bring him back. He is the Braves franchise, and I think Atlanta would be more than prepared to shell out another, 30 million for an extra year. So I actually have him going back to Atlanta for 7 on 32 a year, which will be a total of 224 million. I think there'll obviously be some shopping around. There'll be some conversations with other teams, but ultimately, I don't see him leaving the Braves. What about you, Mario?
No, Freddie Freeman, I would love to see him stay in Atlanta Braves uniform. I can't see him in anything else but an Atlanta Braves uniform. I do see where Evan's coming from, and I think if he's going to go anywhere, it's definitely the Los Angeles Dodgers. The one thing I really do want to see from the Dodgers, I know first baseman isn't typically a must need from their group. I do want to see them because we know they're more than capable of going out and grabbing big fish here and there, trading for big assets. In my opinion, the Max Scherzer Trey Turner deal last year was probably one of the biggest deals I've seen in sports because those two players were well established with the Nationals group, terrific talents of their own individual wealth, and they brought them in and they got a bunch of use out of them. So I really want to see the Los Angeles Dodgers from a team standpoint try to keep someone in. I know they got Chris Taylor and they kept him in, but to me, Chris Taylor, and I know he's going to be a lot different in La La Land there. He's portrayed like a superhero. He won them a series against the Cardinals. They all love him down here, but here in Canada, we don't see Chris Taylor as anything, at least for me. I don't see him as anything too special. He was a depth player a couple of years ago, but he has capabilities. No, that's totally fair. I don't know. Keeping him is one thing, but I think if you can keep another big guy down the road, or even this year, like Kenley Jansen, if you have the option to, which I don't know if they did pass the qualifying offer stage, but you have to try to keep a big fish there. But I might see if Freddie Freeman's on the move, it's got to go to Los Angeles, hometown kid.
Yeah, I mean, we'll get into Chris Taylor later. I mean, being a Dodgers fan, I think that like getting him, I mean, we can talk about this later, but getting him at 4 years, 60 million is a steal in my opinion. And I'll get
Yeah.
into that later, just in terms of future contracts and all that. But the second guy that is a top remaining free agent is Chris Bryant, who was traded at the deadline from Chicago to San Francisco. And he's just a very versatile player. He can play the infield, he can play the outfield, and he can really hit the ball. He hit a lot of home runs in San Francisco, and he was really a cornerstone for the reason why they stole the division from my Dodgers. But I see him. I see him leaving San Francisco and actually going to the Philadelphia Phillies to team up with his best friend Bryce Harper. I think this just makes so much sense for him. The Phillies, I feel like, are knocking on the door. And with the way that the New York Mets approach the offseason, you got to think the Phillies are going to be just as aggressive. I think 5 years, 125 million is totally fair for what Chris Bryant brings to a team. He could play center field, he could play right field, he could play third base. He played a little bit even of first base for the Giants when they were just so depleted. And I'm a huge fan of Chris Bryant. There were reports that he would sometimes even come to LA, but then again, like everyone ends up in a Dodgers graphic. So I couldn't get my hopes up there. But Mario, I'll start with you. You're a Phillies fan. How would you feel about Chris Bryant joining his best friend in Bryce Harper?
Well, as we all know, Bryce Harper is probably one of the best players on the Phillies. Probably is. He did win the NL MVP, of course. So he has a pretty decent role in speaking on what the team goes and gets. And he makes a lot of money, if we do not know. And that money can talk to the owners. You can say, oh, go grab this guy, go grab this guy. It's sort of like maybe not officially, but somewhat unofficially his team. And he would be probably the guy who's vouching to get his old, I wouldn't say his old teammate, but his old friend back, Chris Bryant. Do I see it happening? From a Phillies fan, I'd have to say no. There are so many other assets they have to go get, like absolutely go get. Bullpen, they have a ridiculously bad bullpen. 2 years ago in the, I believe it was the shortened condensed season, they had the worst bullpen in one of the worst
like
years in MLB. It
historically
was
bad,
historically
right?
bad. Yeah, like
Well, they did
ridiculous.
just they got Corey Knable. I mean, I know he's not great, but he helped out my team a lot
Mhm.
last year.
Yeah, no, he's one guy that they had to bring in. I think they need to bring in a bit more. But aside from the Phillies problems, and I know they have a lot, trust me, they do. We're gonna look at Chris Bryant. I think he's gonna land somewhere. And I know you mentioned the Phillies and the Mets. They're trying to make big time splashes. I think the Mets could also still be in on Chris Bryant. I know they're one big splash away. I don't think they're ready to just give up yet. They know what they have to do. They've had a couple tough seasons where they didn't have enough skill to get them over the hump in what appeared to be a pretty easy NL East. And they couldn't ever get over that hump. I think they're still within bringing a big guy back. Chris Bryant is definitely that name value that they want. I think he could definitely make a take in New York. I'm looking at my list here. Any other teams that are suitable? There's not really many other ones except like I think the Giants should try to keep Chris Bryant just because they don't have a lot of right-handed bats in their lineup. If you look at the top of the line, we got Yastrzemski there and so many other players. Yastrzemski is probably one of the bigger leaders on that left side. But no, you need some more right bats. If you lose Chris Bryant, you're obviously losing another one, so you're already more in the hole. So I could definitely see him going to the Mets. If you give me a bit more time, I'll look a little bit more in my notes. But definitely the Mets is the biggest one for me where Chris Bryant could land because they're looking for a big name.
Like outside of San Francisco, if he does end up
Yes, of
deciding.
course.
All right, and then yeah, Mateo, where do you see him? Do you see him staying in San Fran, or
Yeah, no, I've got him leaving as well, but it's not as long of a journey as yours.
where do you?
I've got him going up to Seattle. I think it's a pretty
Oh wow,
interesting conversation right there. I know at the beginning of free agency, they expressed interest in adding an infielder. It was between Bryant and Marcus Semien actually, and obviously they lost out on Semien. Everybody lost out on Semien to that Texas deal,
oh,
but
I don't want
that's
to talk about the
that's a
Rangers.
completely other story. But yeah, they now with Seager's retirement too, they've got a hole to fill at third base, and Bryant's got the versatility to play there. Obviously, there are some question marks. He didn't have the greatest defensive showing at third base in San Francisco. The issue throwing the ball,
Mm-hmm.
he ended up playing a lot of outfield, a lot of time in the outfield. So he's one of those players that gives you a little bit of versatility, even if you do have to play him at third base majority of the time. But right now, the way their depth chart shakes out, it's like it's got to be like Abraham Toro at third, and then you're moving Ty France to second, and you're kind of scrambling at that point, right? So shoring
Yeah,
yourself up and adding that third baseman. They're 25th right now in payroll for a team that is, they see themselves as right on the brink of competing, obviously going
yeah,
after a big acquisition in Robbie Ray as well.
yeah, for
Right.
sure.
So
Yeah,
I think you can justify spending the money. I have him going to Seattle for 5 years on 125, which puts him at 25 a year. And, with the Astros potentially losing Carlos Correa, maybe getting a little weaker, something's opening up in that division. It's definitely going to be a lot tighter next year. And yeah, he's a, Nevada guy, right? So stays on the West Coast and, stays close to home.
yeah,
I
for
think it makes a
sure.
little bit of sense.
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, like, we already know Carlos Correa is leaving Houston. He's made it abundantly clear that he wants a new home. Uh, the third guy is it's a very interesting story. It's Trevor's story of the Colorado Rockies. He wanted to get traded at the deadline. There were no teams that were really interested on with him. He didn't re-sign, but I also just think that Colorado was asking for the house because they knew Trevor's story's gone. He's an interesting one with me because he didn't have a great first half to the season. It wasn't anything that was really wanting probably teams to go after him, just because it wasn't anything that it's like this is worth what the Colorado Rockies are asking for. But anyway, my prediction is that he ends up in Cleveland with the now called the Guardians. And I just think it makes so much sense for them. You know, they lost Francisco Lindor to the Mets. And I just think it makes all the sense in the world. You need another franchise shortstop. So with that being said, I got him at 6 years, 175 million. Cleveland needs to act now. They have Shane Bieber, who's an absolute stud, and they just need to provide him with some sort of offense there. I mean, they have Jose Ramirez. There was reports of him leaving, but I mean, if you could have an infield of Ramirez and Story, that could really make some noise. Mateo, I'll start with you. Where do you think Trevor Story goes?
Yeah, I have to say the Cleveland pick is pretty interesting. I do definitely think they have to pick a direction, and making a move for Story would definitely be picking a direction to try to compete with this core. And I don't have him going to Cleveland. Actually, it's funny, we were just talking about the whole Carlos Correa thing, because I actually have him going to Houston and becoming Carlos Correa's replacement.
Yep.
Obviously, we know Story had a bit of a down year last year. It was a very crowded middle infield market in free agency. So I can see him sort of taking a little bit of a bridge deal to rebuild his value. Houston obviously wants a shortstop. They're in a mode where they can compete to win a championship, and they're going to get a very high quality level shortstop. I have him going to Houston for 2 years, $46 million. So 2 years, 22 million a year to try to rebuild that value and then get a massive contract when he's finished there.
That's interesting. That's interesting.
It's definitely, I think it's definitely capable. One thing, if he goes to Houston, and he would, I don't think Carlos Correa is signing back with Houston.
No,
I think
he's not going to stay.
No, he's not going to stay. So they're absolutely looking for a shortstop. The question was what they would do if they didn't get Trevor Story. You maybe move Bregman to shortstop. I know he played shortstop in his LSU days. He's pretty solid there, but you don't really want that. You want to still go and grab a big fish. They're more than capable of containing. They're more capable of getting a bigger guy. And imagine Trevor Story ripping bombs over that short porch in left field. That is a gold mine on those tracks. Balls are going to be littered up there. So
it's a situation that makes sense for both teams too, right?
100%.
Story gets a chance to rebuild his value, have a couple good seasons in Houston and get paid, and Houston has a bridge shortstop until they decide what they're going to do.
It's a win. It's a win-win. It's definitely a win-win. And Trevor Story, this is probably the best spot he could be with Houston, just because they have a championship chance, deep playoff run chance. They're going to be a solid team in the division. I would assume so, unless all hell breaks loose. But no, he could definitely take advantage on the career-wise splits where he's mashing home runs and all that kind of stuff. Definitely a win-win for both sides. I thought the value when he said it was a bit low, but I'm like, man, this can really work. There's just so much value you can get off of Trevor Story's part of things. And the Houston Astros side of things. But if I were to say one team for me, and it was going to be the Houston Astros, so you really took that one off the board from me. But the other team that I had, and I don't know if this one does come to a surprise to you, but the Tampa Bay Rays, they're a third baseman to replace Yandy Diaz. Now, he's not he hasn't really panned out the power bat that they all thought he would. And the only thing that's really holding me back from seeing the Tampa Bay Rays acquire a guy like Trevor Story is because they don't ever make any big splashes in the off season at the deadline. They don't really hand out money unless to their young guys like Wander Franco, who knows if that deal is ever going to look out to a steal, because right now it's a little shallow. But
wait, can Story play third?
Story can play third as well.
I think he has in the past briefly.
Oh, okay. I thought he was just I only see him as a shortstop, so that's fine.
No, yeah, he's a quite versatile player, which again just boosts his value as well. But no, you could definitely put him at third base. The Tampa Bay Rays, they got the starting pitching. It's really unfortunate that Tyler Glasnow had to suffer that Tommy John injury last season. He's going to be out for, I would say, the majority of this season. A lot of people that I know. Season. Yeah, probably a lot of people that I know, they takes about 1 to 2 years to come back from that injury. So that's a big blow for them. But the pitching is more than adequate on pulling their own weight. They got a lot of young guys, a lot of unknown guys too, which we saw in their long postseason run a couple years ago against the Dodgers, where they lost in that World Series. But no, the pitching's there. The defense is there for the most part. Hitting is not something that they struggle on, but they can really usually get by. They could put them up on a team. I think a guy like Trevor Story heading to third base to the Tampa Bay Rays, I think that's something that's somewhat probable, probably more than many other teams could say in the league. But Astros, I think, is the number one contender for them.
It's
Yeah,
very interesting with the potential for a new stadium to come too, and you bring in a big draw like Trevor Story. You're trying to keep the team in Tampa Bay, right? So you gotta make fans come to the games, and that'll definitely bring them out.
yeah. Just the one issue I have with that is I don't know how much Trevor Story is really going to want to play third base on a day-to-day basis. Like he is known as a shortstop. I think that's the one issue is that you already have Wander Franco there. Like you already committed a lot to him. But it could be interesting. Maybe it's just like I want to go to a place where I can at least win, and if that means I move over, then I move over.
Yeah.
But moving on to the next one is we're talking about a possible replacement for him is Carlos Correa, who has made it abundantly clear that he wants out of Houston. He rejected any and every offer that the Astros threw at him. And, right before we started recording, we were talking about the Yankees as a potential suit for Carlos Correa. But like the more that I think about it, the less it makes sense for me. And I'm just thinking like the one thing that the New York Yankees need is a left-handed bat, and Carlos Correa hits righty. And although he does something that a lot of Yankees players don't do, and that's get on base without having to hit home runs, it makes sense money wise because the Yankees are the Yankees. They could offer him a stupid amount of money. And so I'll just say I have him 7 years, 250 million with the Yankees. I don't think it addresses a need offensively, but defensively, shortstop was probably their worst position in terms of the infield. There were a lot of errors from that shortstop side. They couldn't find anyone to replace Derek Jeter, which is very hard to, but defensively, that position is just horrible for them. And Carlos Correa is probably one of the best defensive shortstops and offensive shortstops in the MLB. So 7 years, 250 million. Mario, what about you, buddy?
I mean, there's so much. I wouldn't say there's so much. There's a lot of very few teams that can offer Carlos Correa what he's looking for. The New York Yankees, not that necessarily that they need a shortstop. Like you said, they need a left-handed power bat, in my opinion. And you can get by with something you grow at home in a shortstop. But I don't think they absolutely need Carlos Correa, but they're definitely going to go for Carlos Correa. And I think they're going to go hard for him. And I think they're going to go so hard that they're going to maybe overpay and they're going to get him. I don't see Carlos Correa going anywhere except for one team that I don't even see it happening because it's a pretty big long shot. And I don't see this team taking Carlos Correa for the price tag that he's asking for, but they need a shortstop, and that's in St. Louis Cardinals. Paul DeJong. I don't listen. It's a lot of things because he's asking for a lot of money, and they got a lot of money tied to Paul Goldschmidt. They got a lot of money tied to Nolan Arenado. You don't have the capital to go not waste it, but go spend it all on Carlos Correa, and that's your offseason hero. He would do wonders for that team. Don't get me wrong, but maybe a guy like Josh Harrison you could bring in, maybe for a lot cheaper. Jed Lowry remains a suitable target for the Cardinals. Maybe you reunite Story with Arenado at shortstop. Who knows? But no, if they're a team that's Paul DeJong has not been getting it done for them on the offensive side of things for quite some time now. Sosa behind him hasn't really been getting it done either on the offensive side. I know he's a little bit young, but I think the Cardinals are not in a contend now mode, but they're pretty darn close to it. And if you want to bring in a guy like Carlos Correa, that could work wonders for the team. But that price tag, man, that price tag really scares off a lot of buyers.
Yeah, I actually thought you were going to say the Dodgers when you were saying a team that doesn't make sense.
Of course you thought I was going to say the Dodgers.
Because I've seen reports that the Dodgers were interested in him, but I was just like, please God, no. Like I don't like, it doesn't make sense. But anyway, Mateo, that's what I thought. But anyway, Mateo, where do you see you?
Yeah, I obviously, like a lot of other people, I'm really high on Correa. I think, by the end of the season, we might be talking about him as like far and away the best shortstop in baseball. I mean, he's going to ask for a lot of money. I have him getting a $9 million. I think I have 9-year, $288 million deal, which would put him at around 32 a year, which is a ridiculous amount of money. But I also have him going to New York just because I can't think of another team that has like the capital to make an offer like that. But it addresses a lot of New York's needs. Again, it's not a lefty bat, but it shores up that shortstop position. Like Gio Urshela just does not cut it there. As somebody who has to watch that defense 19 times a year, you watch the range there. Gio's a great defender at third base, but the range just doesn't work at short. And, you've got, your Torres, and you've got the LeMahieu experiment that they had going on there, and it couldn't find anybody that worked. So,
yeah,
sure. Adding an infielder means you kind of have to decide what's going on with Andujar, because then your outfield's already crowded as is. And I think it might be time to give up on him, even though he hasn't really been given a fair shot. I will say though that this might be my least confident pick, just because Correa is kind of a wild card. Like you've heard all this stuff about, like, he's teasing all this stuff about Chicago and the Cubs and all this stuff, and it's like that's out of nowhere, because why would the Cubs want Carlos Correa? But if you think about it, it's a piece that will bring people out to Wrigley Field, and then in a couple of years they can ship him off for a lot of value. So it's kind of like the same, in the same vein of signing a Marcus Stroman. It's a guy that attracts fans and builds revenue, and then we'll have some value in a trade later on.
And I want to before we go back to like whoever we're talking about next, I just want to say one thing about the destination on where Carlos Correa is going towards. Did you see earlier in the offseason, I think this was before the lockout, Detroit Tigers were trying to take a run at him?
Yeah,
yeah,
honestly,
he rejected them.
I would assume he rejected it, but like that's popularity thing, man.
I thought Detroit was a really good fit for him, but obviously now going after Baez with that, there's no need anymore, right? But I thought Detroit would have been a very good fit for Carlos Correa.
I thought, like we could get into it. I thought Javi Baez got a little overpaid. I'm not as high on. I think Detroit got him more for name value, because if you look at him, that dude strikes out like crazy. But anyway, moving on to the next guy, I kind of want to just jump over a few real quick, and I want to go. Actually, no, never mind. We'll continue on. Nick Castellanos of the Cincinnati Reds. I mean, that guy. I think he gets all this hate because he's just very vocal, obviously, about the commissioner of baseball. But I mean, deep down, he's a really good baseball player. And when we were talking about Chris Bryant potentially leaving, that's where I see the San Francisco Giants coming in and grabbing Nick Castellanos on a 4-year, $75 million deal. I'm not really high on the Giants outfield. I think that was kind of just a Cinderella year with Lamont Wade Jr. I think Mike Yastrzemski definitely has the potential, but I seriously think he's going to die down a lot. I just think it was like everyone clicking at the right time. And obviously, get into this later, I think that's why Kevin Gausman left. When you look at the 5-year plan of the Giants and the 5-year plan of the Blue Jays, obviously the Blue Jays looks more intriguing. And I just think they need another bat, and Nick Castellanos can really hit, and I think he could really knock some into McCovey Cove. I think it would just be great for him, and I'm kind of worried that they get him, because it just means another bat that I have to worry about when we play them every time. But Mario, where do you see Castellanos landing? It seems like he does want kind of a new change of scenery. Cincinnati just really isn't it anymore.
And I mean, you said the Giants. I have a very big soft spot for the Giants, and I really hope I don't see them go down that spell again where they're just another mediocre 500 team. Last year, I personally did believe at the beginning of the year, April, May, and then turned to June, I'm like, man, this team can make some noise. And unfortunately, they didn't get to that point. The Dodgers really took that one away from them. But no, I think they had the pieces last year that just all came together at once. Everything worked well. I don't think they can reproduce that again. That being said, they're going to need some more offensive strength on the right side, like I mentioned earlier, and they're going to want to get a bit more outfielder depth as well. And I won't just say depth, but a starter who can play there for almost the entire season. A guy like Nick Castellanos does suit that role. He's a right-handed bat, like I mentioned, and he's a big power guy. He would work wonders in the San Francisco Giants system. If there's any other team that I could see making a run at him, maybe the Atlanta Braves. They're losing outfielders in Jock Peterson and Eddie Rosario. And I think you just need another power bat. Ronald Acuna Jr. is coming back. I'm not sure if Marcell Ozuna is coming back as well. He had that whole situation with that criminal stuff. I don't think it's going to be the right choice for the Braves to bring him back. So now you're in the hole from another outfielder. So maybe Nick Castellanos heads over to Atlanta. Maybe he wants another, not another ring, but maybe he does want a ring, and he can maybe get it in the Atlanta Braves. So those are the two teams for me. And the outfield market is very hungry. Teams are very hungry to pounce on an outfield. There's a lot of players circulating in that outfield position. Nick Castellanos is one of the biggest fish. I think one of these teams can go and land him.
Yeah, for sure. And like you bring up the Braves, I think their whole outfield is free agents except for Ronald Acuna Jr. So
funny how that works.
I mean, it's just interesting to see. I have some thoughts about where some outfielders are going, but Mateo, where do you think Castellanos lands?
Yeah, I think Castellanos' value is very dependent on sort of how these discussions go with the players and the league, because that could spell the end of the pitcher hitting in the National League, to be honest. If we get a universal DH, Nick Castellanos' value goes through the roof. I mean, it's no secret that he is one of the premier hitters in this league. Even in Detroit, he was still a fabulous hitter. It was just the park was screwing him over because it was Comerica is such a large park. And, you end up leading the league in doubles for your, the first like 4 years of your career. And all of a sudden those all turn into home runs in Cincinnati. And now everybody's paying attention to you. I was really high on Nicholas Castellanos when he first got into Cincinnati. I thought it was a great spot for him with the ballpark. And I think unless we see, like, I'd love to see him in an AL team, but I don't think there's a fit for him there right now. I think most of the teams that are going to be interested are in the National League, but I don't really know if now is the time where I can see him moving. I know he's a little frustrated with the situation in Cincinnati, but I can see him signing up for like another 2 years in Cincinnati and then reevaluating after that. I don't think he's in any rush to, go and play for a team that might actually just be worse than the Reds themselves.
Oh wow. And then Mario, did we get to? I'm like having a brain fire right now. Did we ask your opinion on Castellanos?
Yeah, and I just
Yeah,
want to
we
say,
did.
I just
Okay,
want
yeah,
to say
yeah,
one thing, because the universal DH, that is a very big
Yeah.
card on the table. If they can
for
agree
sure.
on that, there's a lot of players. One thing that comes to mind, Jorge Soler. I know he's not very reliable on the defensive end of the ball, but man, that dude, and I played MLB The Show quite enough to know how much his power
Yeah,
is articulated through his swing. No, he if the DH rule does come to play, there's going to be a lot of players like Nicholas Castellanos. I'm so glad you
Yeah.
brought it up, Mateo, because that is a very interesting lens that we can take for almost every player, specifically outfielders who the corner ones who thrive off the power hitting. So I think the designated hitter
sure.
rule will play a big role in what these players receive on the money side of things, and definitely where they land. But Nick Castellanos, for me, I said the not the New York
Yeah,
Giants. That's a
the
totally different story.
yeah
The
the San
San
Francisco.
Francisco Giants, who I'm hoping
Yeah,
can still keep a good record intact next season.
Yeah.
yeah, for sure. All right, and then just steering ship, Carlos Rodon. Interesting story for him. He had a incredible year this year. I think it was just shadowed by Lance Lynn, but I have him going to the Tampa Bay Rays for 4 years, 75 million as well. I just think it makes total sense there. They just lost Tyler Glasnow. They're still a very great team, and knowing like Tampa Bay Rays, they're always competitive. I think it makes perfect sense for him to be that number two starter once Glasnow comes back. But I think he's definitely capable of holding down number one role. I don't really see any other teams, maybe even the San Francisco Giants after losing oh my God, Kevin Gosman to Toronto could be a possibility. I feel like even St. Louis could be a possibility. The Cardinals, they really need starting pitching. There's so many teams that are going to be after Carlos Rodon. I think his market is just very competitive, but yeah, that's my opinion. 4 years, 75 million with Tampa Bay to really solidify that starting rotation. And then yeah,
I got him, and I think this team, I don't know, Mateo, you're going to agree with me on this one, but this team needs more starting pitching help than I think almost any other team. That is not the Los Angeles Dodgers, their neighbor, the Los Angeles Angels, because there is nothing really sustainable behind Shohei Ohtani. They brought in Syndergaard, and they're looking for a rebound year from him after another year of injury. That guy's just always getting injured, apparently. He's a piece of glass out there on the mound. But no, I think starting pitching depth is an absolute must need. I think they're just not really strong in any particular area. Like they're mediocre on the offensive side. They have the best player in baseball in Mike Trout. That's a whole argument, but I love Mike Trout. He's a terrific talent in his own rights. And the offensive side of the ball, they're not too great. They're just a mediocre team, I'd say. Defensively, they've had their pretty decent area of blunders. Lots of errors come from them throughout the year. And their relievers, they brought in, I believe, Iglesias. He helps them out a lot in the pen. So many other pieces.
So
yeah, he's a very good player. So many pieces in the pen. So at least they worked on the bullpen where saving and closing out games with their struggle before, but now it's moved on to starting pitching behind Shohei Ohtani, who I don't think is going to get a lot of innings because he's now the more versatile player that we know. He's going to hit a lot more. He's going to play in the field a lot more. He's not going to just be pitching that much. So I don't think his innings are going to be limited. I think the Los Angeles Angels must be going after a pitcher, and Carlos Rodon, it would be a terrific second or 1-2 punch with Shohei Ohtani and Carlos Rodon on the bump.
Yeah, I didn't even think of that, to be honest with you, because the Angels just have no fans. Like,
yeah, that's true.
Oh man. Yeah, no, I agree with you. It's an interesting fit in Los Angeles for the Angels, but I have to admit that you've already taken a flyer on Syndergaard, and adding Rodon he's not a sure thing. We've seen a lot of pitchers go that are, pretty much sure things, like, what you can expect from them. Rodon is he could kind of go either way. Like, is he going to be able to repeat the success? Is he going to be able to have a comparable year, or is he going to revert to, the Carlos Rodon that we are used to seeing or are used to not seeing? But yeah, going back to what Evan said, I actually have him going to St. Louis. I think there's an interesting situation going on there with the rotation. You've got obviously guys like Wainwright who are getting older. You're going to have a full year of Jack Flaherty next year, which is going to be really great. You added a Steven Matz to shore that depth up. And I think if you can bring in a Carlos Rodon, I have him on 3 years for $50 million. Then you get a really interesting two-headed monster. You've got, the right-handed fireballer with Flaherty, and then you've got a very different look from the left side with Rodon. I mean, obviously there's question marks, so I don't think he's going to get like a massive payday, but it fortifies the rotation with somebody who has the potential to be like a legitimate ace for this team. And I think you've got the defense, and if you can get the pitching, then your run prevention is sorted, and you just have to trust that your bats are gonna carry you to win the division.
And
yeah, for sure. Oh,
sorry to interrupt, Evan. I apologize for keeping on doing this, but the conversation that's Mateo sparking is really nice. I mean, I think they're going to have to, in that division, they're going to have to bring starting pitching to go up against a team like the Milwaukee Brewers, who have that, I believe they have Woodruff there, Corbin Burns, who had a terrific, outstanding season last year. And I believe Freddie Peralta as well as the third starter there for that 1-2-3 punch.
Is the third head, yep.
Yeah, that's a lethal combination.
It's disgusting.
And you can't even go through them. And if you go through them, you go to the bullpen. Josh,
those Brewers, they have so much in the pipeline too in terms of young pitching talent. It's a scary team there. But I also think that the Central is a little more open than people are willing to admit. I think there's room for a lot of competition there. I think your top three teams are going to be competing in it for a really long time. Whether it's if Cincinnati can stay competitive, you're going to have them. You're going to have St. Louis, and you're going to have Milwaukee in a pretty tight race by the end of next year.
And I do see Cincinnati as a bit of a they have to do something now in this deadline or this offseason, whatever you want to call it, because right now they're losing players. Their team's not looking too strong. They didn't have that terrific of a year last year. They had a big hot streak near the end of the year where they tried to make a little bit of a push, but they got to get more sustainability and consistency there. But man, it would be terrific to see pitchers like Carlos Rodon heading and solidifying the rotation in St. Louis, because then you got like a 1-2 punch and a 1-2 battle for that spot in the NL Central, which is, like you mentioned, Mateo, pretty wide open.
Yeah, I was going to say this though. If like the Dodgers don't do anything in terms of like offensive power, I can see them getting Carlos Rodon, and the way that they need another pitcher. Like, we don't know the situation with Bauer. Dustin May's reported he had Tommy John, so he'll probably come back. I'd say around like 40 games into the season. I'd like Tony Gonsolin, but I think he's just more suited for the bullpen. Or even like the Dodgers, what they do a lot because their bullpen is just so deep is that they'll give Gonsolin that 3 innings. But I think like having a guy like Carlos Rodon, they lost Scherzer, Kershaw, injury prone right now. Like, I think he could make sense in the way that Dodgers develop pitching. I think they could turn callers. I mean, they turned fucking Ross Stripling into an all-star. I think that's pretty hard to do.
Volumes.
It's pretty hard to do that. And but anyway, moving on, we have Anthony Rizzo of the Yankees the Cubs traded everyone in the offseason. I'm sorry, not in the offseason, at the deadline. They made it pretty clear to the rest of the league that they're just doing a rebuild stage. I see Anthony Rizzo switching places with one of his best friends in Freddie Freeman and going to the Atlanta Braves on 6 years, $180 million. I think the whole thing that I've been hearing just with Freeman is that guys who are in the West Coast eventually want to come home. And I just think it makes sense for Freeman in LA, and I think it makes sense for Rizzo to quickly replace him in Atlanta and take the deal that Freddie Freeman continues to reject. I think the Yankees, they have Luke Voit. I think they really need to keep him. That dude's a powerhouse, and I don't think there's any point in constantly keeping him on the bench or making him a DH. Like, he's suited to be the first baseman in New York. And I just don't think the Yankees need to pick one if they want to keep Rizzo or if they want to go after Correa. Like, they can't have both. So I think they go with Correa just in terms of the need at shortstop, and then the Braves pick up Anthony Rizzo in the offseason.
So
you want to know? Totally. Yeah. I think you're totally right about the whole first base situation in New York. I mean, there's no room for 2 first basemen there, especially if you need to keep that DH spot open for a Stanton, right? So you've got an interesting situation there where New York really needs to retain their left-handed bats, and especially the left-handed bats that produce value for them, like Anthony Rizzo did. But it's a situation in which Voit is controllable, and Voit is, a little bit younger, and Voit might have a little bit more,
Upside.
not upside in the coming years. Obviously,
Mhm.
I'm not saying that he'll be a better player than what we've seen from Anthony Rizzo, but in the next couple of years, obviously Rizzo's going to hit a little bit of his regression curve, and you're going to see Voit maybe surpass him in the present moment. But I actually have Rizzo flipping to Boston. They were obviously in at him at the deadline. They couldn't manage to work out the trade, but I have him going to Boston in for 3 years and shoring up their spot at first base.
If
That's interesting.
if I were to take my spot for Anthony Rizzo, I love the guy. He had a terrific career, and it was really sad to see it go in Chicago. I remember growing up specifically. This is a little bit of a tidbit you might want to know about me. When it comes to cheering for baseball, I am not, I wouldn't say weird. I'm very unbiased with baseball in the sense that I love just watching it for the purpose of seeing competition versus competition. And I always switch teams every year. I stopped very recently, just stuck to the Phillies. But every year I switch a team and I'm like, okay, I'm going to cheer for this team. At one point, it was the Colorado Rockies, believe it or not. Big Arenado guy. And,
How did you think? Did you lose a bet?
No. I was just really high on Nolan Arenado. He's one point my favorite player in the league. And then I realized, man, and I was really young.
Yeah.
I'm like, man, this team has nothing else aside from Nolan Arenado. So that was a mistake. But I go for almost not every team, but a lot of different teams every year. Chicago Cubs were one of them in their wonderful year in 2016 when they won the World Series. And I followed Anthony Rizzo, Chris Bryant, the whole gang very closely. And I loved watching Anthony Rizzo down in Chicago. He was just terrific. All the home runs that he hit, and Fenway was always buzzing with him there. It's not going to be the same without him. But I don't think New York is going to be the same without him because he's not going to be there. I think he's going to be in San Diego. San Diego is a big first baseman problem that they have two ways of solving. Now, if they want to go out and get Anthony Rizzo, I think they're more than capable of doing so, but they have to get Eric Hosmer off the books. That deal, I believe it's an 8-year. I don't got the dollars and cents in front of me right now, but it is a heavy one that they're really trying. Yeah, it's a big boy, big contract, and he hasn't really performed. I think he had 12 home runs all of last season. So you're not getting any sort of value from him. I think he has to go, and that opens up that first base position. They can move Jake Cronenworth, I'm pretty sure, to first base, and then maybe they can go and bring in a middle infielder to solidify that lineup. But I can really see them making a run at Anthony Rizzo and trying to keep Cronenworth where he stays. So no, I think first baseman wise, but there's a team that needs him. It would be maybe the Padres, but there's a lot of factors that have to play with that, and that's including getting Hosmer's contract off the books. One of the worst contracts, might add, in the entire MLB.
Yeah.
Because it is just
give a prediction on what's the dollars that Anthony Rizzo gets?
I don't have a prediction in front of me. Maybe
you just think
form one, but I just think San Diego's the right fit, and they're more than capable of forking out some money.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm pretty sure that's where it all started for Rizzo too, isn't it?
Yeah, it would be a reunion. Right?
So it would be a reunion coming full circle.
So San Diego, in their prospect system, had Anthony Rizzo and Trey Turner, and none of them are on the team anymore. You couldn't keep one of them. I remember that they almost got Max Scherzer, and then LA was like, "Oh no,
that was tough. That was tough." I remember,
dude,
man,
I'm not even like when I saw that notification they went to the Padres, I was like, "Oh my god, like we are donezo." And then 2 hours later, I'm happy again. But I was just gonna, Mateo. Wanted to talk about what your prediction. I don't think 3 years is what Anthony Rizzo is targeting, just because he's 32 years old, and I think this is his last chance at getting a hefty deal. And it's going to be a lot harder for him to get a new deal at 35 than it is for him to get one at 32. So I think like the 6 years to take him till he's 38, just in terms of security, I think it's just a little harder for him at 35 to get a new deal.
Yeah, no, I agree with you that he'll definitely want a longer deal. I just don't know if a team is really going to be willing to commit to anything more than 4 years for a guy like Anthony Rizzo. Don't get me wrong, he's a great player. And, if you're going to have somebody get old, you want them to be at first base. It's a position where, you don't necessarily have to be as mobile. But a lot of Rizzo's value comes from his defensive ability as well. He's a fantastic hitter, but a lot of his value comes from his ability as a defender and his athleticism. And that's, with injuries, with age, that is going to decline. And so I don't really see a team giving him more than 4 years.
Yeah, for sure. And when you're talking about injuries and age, there's another man, Clayton Kershaw. And I switched my prediction just now, actually. I had him at 2 years, $30 million, going home to the Texas Rangers. I'm going to switch that. I switched that up. I'm going 2 years, $25 million to stay with the Dodgers. And the one reason is that I don't think any other team wants him just for the sake of injury concerns. And if there is a team that's going to retain him, or a team that's going to sign him, it's going to be the Dodgers just to stay in LA for the rest of his career. How you're saying, I can't imagine Freeman in another jersey. I can't imagine Clayton Kershaw in another jersey. And this is the first time he's ever been a free agent. And I just think it doesn't make sense for Texas the way that they've been going so aggressive. I just don't know how much Clayton Kershaw would even play in that rotation just because injuries is a huge factor in his derailing value. And it sucks that he had to end his season on an injury, but I don't think it's ending in LA. But Mateo, what are your thoughts?
I mean, I have him going to Texas. I think the figure you mentioned, 2 years for 30 million total, so that's 15 a year, is a pretty fair estimate for Kershaw. I mean, a lot of teams are obviously going to be very hesitant with the injury concerns, but Texas has a lot of money to play with, right? They can afford to sink $15 million for the next 2 years and it won't even make a dent, right? They've got, it's a short term, little bit of a payday deal, and it kind of fits with the big spending mentality that Texas has had this offseason. It adds some interesting pieces to this rotation. I mean, you add a veteran who is obviously, he's going to sit beside John Gray in this rotation. You've got a lot of young arms coming up. Maybe there's some potential for him to mentor Leiter as these arms sort of move through the system, depending on how fast they get through. I don't know. Prospects seem to be shooting up these days, especially those pitchers. But yeah, I mean, he goes home. It's actually, I think I'm going to be a little bit of an overpay for Kershaw, but
It is, but it's valid.
It's valid, and it's Texas.
Yeah.
So
So he'll keep a lot more of that money than if he was in LA. Mario, what about you?
Well, everything's bigger in Texas, so that's the most suitable fit. I do have to side with you a bit, Evan. I think he's going to stay in Dodgers blue. I really just can't see him in another uniform. I grew up watching Kershaw. I think the Dodgers. I think there's a lot of hesitant buyers right now because of the injury stuff that he's gone throughout his career very extensively as well. You know what you can get when he's on his highs, but when he's on his highs, there's a very few times he's doing that. So his value is really scarce around the league. I personally can't really put a price tag on it, to be quite honest, because you don't really know what you're going to get from him. You're going to get those Cy Young performances one night, and then the other night he's complete on the other side of the moon, and he's getting hurt all the time. So there's no real way to pin a price on this dude. I think the Dodgers are going to stick with him and say, listen, I'll give you a little bit of an overpay just to have you on here, because they do need a starting pitching depth behind their the stars that they already have. But no, I can definitely see him going back to his hometown in Texas. There's so many teams that can see him going on. One of them is the Seattle Mariners. Now, this one's a bit of a stretch, but they need a veteran starter. They're looking for one. They got Ray, Flexen, Gonzalez, Gilbert, Dunn. Gio Gonzalez, Gilbert, Dunn. I'm not very familiar with their names as well. They could very well be competitive this season. Kershaw, if you get him on those highs, he could definitely play a role in knocking off those big teams like the Houston Astros in that division. I know it's a bit of a stretch. I do think my number one choice is that he's going to stay with the Dodgers. My number two choice is probably going to go back to his hometown, because you're an athlete. You're going to want to go play for your hometown. It's just no questions asked if it's made and the opportunity is made. But Mariners are probably the more suitable one if you want to move outside of those options. No?
Yeah, I do. It's just like I don't know how many times he really wants to play the Houston Astros. Like, I think the World Series is just enough. And also, like, Seattle is just not like a great city that you want to like end on, especially like when you're looking at Clayton Kershaw. He's at the end of his career. It's either you're retiring in LA or you're just heading back home. Like, I think it's either that.
Yeah.
Yeah, Mateo, you want to?
No, I'm just going to say we know that Houston is willing and able to write blank checks for players. So, I mean, paying a little bit more for Kershaw to have him for the next 2 seasons, again, if it doesn't
they did that with Verlander.
Yeah, again, but if it doesn't hit, then it's not a big deal, because, you have the payroll to be able to eat that kind of a salary, right?
He's not going to Houston.
I said Texas.
Oh, I thought you said Houston.
I might have misspoke.
Dude.
Oh, did I say Houston?
Yeah,
I'm
you
sorry.
said Houston, and I was like, oh my God.
I'm sorry.
That's what I was saying. That's what they did with Verlander.
No. Yeah. No, I'm saying we know that Texas is able to write a blank check, and if the Kershaw thing hits, then it's a big hit for them, and they could find themselves in the playoffs a little bit earlier, right?
For sure.
But if it misses, then it's not a big deal, because it's just you're eating 15 million on a team that probably isn't going to be super competitive anyway.
Yeah, absolutely. For sure. And then switching, well, actually not switching. We're just going to head to the bullpen. Kenley Jansen, he's been a Dodger ever since he switched from catcher to closing pitcher. I've had my mixed feelings about him. Obviously he gets a lot of saves just because the Dodgers win a lot of games, but he's also blown a lot of games, and he definitely was a huge reason as to why the Dodgers didn't win the division. I remember I was at a game where the Dodgers were up 5-3 on the Giants, and we ended up losing 6-3 and 6-5 in the ninth because Kenley Jansen gave up 3 runs in the ninth inning. So he's now going to be your guys' problem. I have him going to the Toronto Blue Jays on 3 years, $45 million. The Blue Jays really need a bullpen guy. And I mean, although I do shit talk Kenley Jansen, he does have probably one of the nastiest two-seamers I've ever seen. And that slider and cutter is it's gross what he can throw. And I mean, you look at the one time he was clutch for the Dodgers in that game against St. Louis when he made Tommy Edmonds look absolutely silly and got him to swing so late on a two-seamer high up in the zone. And Edmonds was like, what the fuck? Like, what did I just swing at? And look, the Blue Jays really need, I'll say it again, they need another bullpen guy. They have Nate Pearson coming out of the bullpen for some reason. I don't know why. He needs to be a starter. If anything, move Ryu to the bullpen. Like that guy is. I think Nate Pearson has so much more potential than Ryu does. I mean, that's just like a joke, but like maybe food for thought. I don't know. But anyway, Kenley Jansen ends up in Toronto. I think it makes all the sense in the world, even for the Dodgers too. There's no need for the Dodgers to re-sign him. As much as I have a love-hate relationship with him, they have Blake Trinan, who's probably also one of the best closers in baseball and has a slider that makes Fernando Tatis go golfing. So, Mario, I'll start with you. Do you think he'll go to your hometown Blue Jays?
No, but maybe you could go to my hometown Phillies, my boys up here. It's going to be a bidding war for Kenley Jansen this year. You got the Reds that are going to be in on him. You got the Jays that are going to be on him. And I know the Phillies are going to be more than in on him. They all need reliever help, and relievers are hard to come by, especially when they're as successful and with a resume like Kenley Jansen. I think he can definitely make a run at all these teams. I think it's just going to come down to who's going to give him the biggest contract. I don't know if they're going to really be looking too much in depth about what he's going to bring. They know what he can really bring on a consistently good nights. And the Jays, I think they're going to expect to be a pretty contending team this year. Reds and the Phillies are all going to be in the mix as well. So these teams are all on a bit of an uptrend. They're not there. They're not down, but they're sort of moving up slowly. Kenley Jansen is definitely going to be one that they want to roll with. Maybe they can offer him a bit more term as well, and they're going to give him a lot of dollars. So one of these three teams, it's really hard to say which one because they're all going to make a big run and a big case for this guy.
Yeah. You make valid points, Mateo. Do you see him ending up in the six?
I actually have him ending up in Philly, funny enough. But
I have one guy's loyalty.
I have him going there on a 3-year, $48 million deal. I mean, obviously, we were speaking, I don't know if it was on this podcast or just before we started, but, the Phillies have had a historically bad bullpen for the last couple of years, and they really need to shore that up. And bringing in a guy like Kenley Jansen, although he doesn't have the best track record, is, he's a proven pitcher with great stuff that in the right situation is really going to flourish and help a team be successful. I think one of the main things that you want to focus on when you're building a bullpen is building from the back end up, right? So getting that really solid anchor, that really solid guy that can come in and, you can feel confident putting him with the game on a line in a 1-run game and a tie game in extra innings situation like that. He's really important when you're building a pen and you're adding smaller pieces. If you go the other way, it tends to fall apart because then you're trying to figure out who is my closer, who's going to come in the 8th inning, and you have a lot of these guys that really aren't ready for those roles. So bringing a guy like Kenley Jansen in allows you to sort of, accelerate your bullpen building without having to give up a lot of prospect capital and trade for a guy like Craig Kimbrell to do something like that. So I have him ending up in Philly because I just think it makes a lot of more sense. Like if you're going to start to build a bullpen, you want to start with a solid foundation.
Yeah, for sure. And
do you want to say something? No, I just wanted to ask Mateo because he's more of he's got a bit of a handle on the Jays standpoint of things. If the Jays fall out of the race and they do not get Kenley Jansen, who would be the number one thing to go with? Because I don't know, do you think they can roll an entire stretch of games? Now, we don't know how much games they're going to play because of the whole situation with the CBA and all that. But do you think they can run with guys like Meza, Merriweather, Romano, and even Kimber, who looked pretty good last year? Is that a combo that they can roll with and close out games quite successfully, more than they typically would? Or do they have to go get an absolute set closer like Kenley Jansen would be. I'm trying to say, or can they roll with four guys?
I think obviously you need to add depth, but I think a lot of people, especially like in the international media, like outside of Canada, severely underrate Jordan Romano. Statistically, if you
Absolutely.
look at it, he was one of the better closers in baseball last year. If we're being like pessimistic, he was a top 10 closer in baseball last year. So the issue wasn't at the base with the Jays. It was, the supporting pieces and the fact that you had to go to a guy like Mesa every night. You had to go to a guy like Simber every night if you wanted some value out of him.
For sure.
I do believe that you're going to get a full year out of Pearson in the bullpen. I think the rotation's just a little bit crowded, barring any injuries. I think your fifth starter, if you don't make a trade, is probably Ross Stripling. And you're going to end up rolling Pearson out of the pen. I don't think you can put Ryu out of the pen. I think he's making a
No, it
little
was
too
a
much.
joke. It was a
Yeah, I think
joke.
he's
But
making.
I
I think
would
he's
flip
making way too much money for that, and the velocity just doesn't play out of the pen.
I
So
would flip Stripling and Nate Pearson. I just think like if you want Nate Pearson to be a starter down the road, I the one thing that you can't have happen is him become a bullpen guy for a year and then go to being a starter because that's just a year setback and I don't think it's going to work.
see, it's funny because we were talking about Milwaukee earlier and how they have sort of their pipeline for pitching. And a lot of times you'll see in Milwaukee how a lot of those guys came up is they came up like a
Through the
Brandon
bullpen.
Woodruff,
True.
came up
Yeah.
through the bullpen, pitched in the bullpen, pitched in big situations like the Jays have tried to do with Pearson. Obviously, they got him into the playoffs in 2020. It didn't work out against Tampa Bay, but he got some great innings. He got some experience. I think if he can stay healthy, you can probably get a full year out of him in the bullpen. Maybe he's your, like 2 inning guy. Maybe you can give him the seventh and the eighth and then bridge you to Romano, right? If you need to. So I think it'll be a great learning experience for Pearson, a guy who hasn't pitched a ton of innings at the major league level. And this is a great way to, get the workload up and get him some experience without necessarily putting him at risk of another big injury before he's ready to be competitive. As far as the Jays bullpen goes, I think honestly, you've added like a Yimi Garcia. I think if you can go out there and target another free agent like a Michael Givens, who's a guy I've had my eye on for a lot of times, if you can go get solid depth pieces like that, like a Michael Givens, like, maybe another lefty out of the pen as well that can eat innings and can give you solid innings and aren't necessarily like these big flashy names, I think your pen will be fine.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I was just saying, like, I think that could also just be difference of coaching. Like, I could be completely wrong there. I mean, like, if you just look at the success of Milwaukee, like, I completely forgot that Woodruff 2 years ago was pitching out of the bullpen against the Dodgers for Milwaukee, and he has incredible stuff.